Hello, everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. And today's video is on whether high level or lower level starting points for gaming are better or preferable. And today it's definitely more a matter of opinion and preference. So it's not quite a DM guide, but I also don't think it's quite necessarily a tableside chats video. It could go either way, honestly, but for now, I'm going to leave this in the DM guide category. And there's some very specific reasons why, and it's, relating to story, character development, and the like. And really, when it comes right down to it, for high level play or lower level play, for myself and most of the players that I get together and game with, we generally prefer to start off with lower level play. Not that higher levels aren't fun, not that having that much power, that variety of abilities isn't just so damn cool, especially when you're throwing in all the different wonderful magic items that characters can and will accumulate. But the reason why we tend to prefer lower level play is because getting to those higher levels is the biggest part of the fun. It's like 90% of the fun watching a low level character become powerful, seeing if they survive, if they make it, between how the player decides to build the character, what equipment comes their way, what situations they encounter and how they deal with them, and then just as importantly, if not the most important, how well the fates smile or frown upon that character. You know, those critical fails, those critical successes, all such incredible things. And then there's all the role playing that goes into it, all the story that just develops. I mean, a high level fighter, starting off at level 14, 15, you got +2 full plate, a +3 great sword of speed that's holy and undead bane. Well, possibly that's a bit much there, but you get the idea. With all these different items, and it's just equipment that you start off with, and this is a character that you need to figure out a whole personality and history for, because a level 14 character is nothing to sneeze at in the slightest. That's a really powerful character, even if it's just a fighter. It's nothing to say of like a wizard or a cleric or druid. That's really high tiers of power. That's when wizards start to come into their own around level 5 to 7ish, but by 14, holy crap, they're really getting to that category of being unstoppable. Really, the only things that are going to threaten them are creatures with significant inherent magical ability or other spellcasters. Most other creatures are going to struggle dealing with a full-on spellcaster. But again, there should be a history to that character, different exploits and legends, and that's a lot to come up with. And it can be a lot to come up with, and typically by first session, unless this is a session that's been planned out a couple of months in advance to give everybody time to build their characters on top of just having to live life as, I was going to say as an adult, but even as a teenager, I mean, there's a lot going on. And first session, those characters are probably not going to be entirely fleshed out. They'll be complete on the sheet, but personality, how they react to things, what's the story behind that sword, what's the story behind those scars, what magical traditions did you start off with, who was your master that instructed you, what's the legacy and history of your grove, what's your own legacy and history within your sacred grove, what spirits do you have bound to your service. Things like this, things that can come up, unique weird little things that also don't quite fit within the scope of the rules. Those are things that tend to develop more naturally if you start off from a lower level. And by lower levels, I'm meaning like 1 to 3, 5 tops. And even then, level 5 is going to start having a good reputation established and built up around them. There's going to be a little bit of a history there. Not so significant as, level 16, but still something that you need to have figured out there. And just to give you an example, because we all like to start at lower levels, a very good friend of mine made a. Oh, I'm trying to remember what the name of the class is. I want to say Ravager, but that's not quite right. For Pathfinder, it's a combo class of Ranger and the Rogue, if I remember correctly. In either case, is definitely built to be kind of a glass cannon-ish sort of frontline fighter. Definitely relies on stealth and ambush to get things started, and will finish out with just some really heavy hits. And he's following along a very specific melee-oriented build for his character class. Now he's a full elf, but he's half high elf, half wild elf. And we did some unique things figuring out his stats and told him, okay, well, given that you're technically a full elf, although you're from two entirely different cultures of elf with different ability scores, statistics, and bonuses and penalties, I will let you pick one set or the other. You can't mix or match, but he went with the wild elf set of statistics and is embracing that culture. But we built into his backstory that because his mother was a high elf, she definitely brought him up with a greater degree of sense uh, of high elven culture and that high elven sensibility of refinement, which he chafed against just a little bit, and as he wanted to know more of his father's culture and history, and ended up uh, leaving from his mother's home for his father's homelands and learned his culture, learned his people's history, language, their methodologies, but he never forgot where he came from with his mother either. And so he is a little bit of a balancing between the two, though he embraces his wild elf heritage. And part of what he wanted to hold on to for his high elven heritage was a particular high elven two-handed blade, almost like a long curving saber, not like a katana or anything like that, but this curving light elven saber that still is a powerful, meaty two-handed weapon. But over the course of gameplay, we went through a particular event, which was an offshoot remake reinterpretation of Bendy and the Ink Machine, which my players were absolutely unnerved by. It was great. But they hit a point where they're fighting Zippy, the Ink Demon. I know, creative genius right here. But they're fighting him, and my friend's character dives out in the middle of the fight and begins laying into the monster with his greatsword. It's just a regular greatsword, but he's not doing full damage to it. It has this immense amount of damage reduction, or at least, for level 3 or 4, damage reduction of any sort is debilitating for a combat encounter. And they had access to this material called the pure ink of creation, and so they had a story. They had blank script pages, and so in this unique pocket dimension, they're using this pure ink of creation, and they're writing out this story for how combat goes. And the story they write out is, it's like, oh, it's this terrible, horrifying battle. All hope seems lost. But in that last moment, in this bravery, this sheer fury of this elven warrior just laying into this terrifying beast without regard for his own safety, only trying to save his friends and the NPC that they're trying to rescue out of this place. Something happens with his sword. In that moment, the unique situation of plowing through this magical entity made out of this powerful ink stuff reshapes the blade, and it reshapes it, and it has this swirling dust-like image around it that just doesn't quite seem to go away, because they used blotting sand, which blotting sand is, to basically think like kitty litter, or the pink stuff that the janitors at schools will throw out to absorb vomit and the like, the stuff that just absorbs moisture. Using that deals a great deal of damage to the various ink monsters they've been fighting. And so they had thrown some into Zippy and dealt some damage to him. And with the ink creation, the sword plowing through that, and the blotting sand, and the fact that they're using this pure ink of creation to write a story in this unique pocket dimension, transform the blade into a magic item, the Sword of Desiccation. Basically, it just any creature that has a significant amount of liquid composition to it. So mortal creatures, the Ink Demon, water elementals, and the like, they'll take extra damage from it as if it were had the Bane quality against them. Creatures like golems and undead, it won't necessarily work against, but vampires who need to absorb blood, it could potentially work against. We'll see how we want to play that one out. But I'm getting off track here. Point being, that was a unique moment of storytelling where the players had a good idea using elements I had been introducing, and so I decided to reward them and reward the player's bravery and courage, throwing himself at this ink demon with a unique magic item, and it reshaped its appearance too. If I ever find a drawing of that, maybe I'll share that. Maybe I'll put it at the very end of the video today. Maybe not. We'll see. In either case, that was a unique moment and a unique story that got them a unique item and reward with story behind it. And the player decided, well, I might have to ditch that elven saber because this is really cool. I like that this has story behind it. I like that this has this history that's tied to my character and this moment of foolish, foolhardy, overzealous bravery that he had. Uh, and that's something that's hard to implement and put in with higher level characters when you're just starting off with higher level characters. Building into that, if he decides to keep this sword, he can turn it into something more as time goes on. And who knows, maybe with my own storytelling, depending on how things progress, maybe I will advance the sword myself. It's hard to say what exactly will happen, especially since game times are so spaced out and infrequent anymore with the world at hand. But I hope that this helps to impress upon you an example of how these characters will have more character as they progress and level up and make their way to higher levels and have these unique stories and histories that otherwise might go unnoticed or unused or unthought of when making higher level characters to start off in, well, higher level play. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that, and certainly if you're a DM and you want to do a higher level setting, consider working with your players to have some of these unique stories in mind, because these characters need to have that history. Or at least I think so, because that's just part of good role playing. If you're more concerned with just the numbers and statistics and going through this particular story and seeing if the players can survive it with these high level characters, well, then, fantastic. More power to you. But for those of us more concerned with roleplay elements, I do believe that starting off with lower level characters is the better choice and option, just for those reasons. But with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so much for your time. Oh, I have been joined by my most adorable co-host, Nora, journeyman storyteller and initiate to the seventh circle of lore, woken up from sleep. Ah, with that said, though, thank you all so much for your time. Have yourselves a good night.